Hey, this is Jerry Fetta with the Wealth Walk. I want to share with you my story of how I understood the wealth building blueprint of the top 1%. Stay tuned. I'm going to give you my story and some of the key things that I learned and implement with my own finances that I think you can benefit from as well. Hey, welcome back to Wealth Walk. This is Jerry Fetta. So I do these Wealth Walk segments because I want to share my story. What is it that I'm doing? What are the things that I've learned as I've built wealth, as I've built my own way toward financial independence? And also, what are some things we're doing with our clients and members so you can see behind the scenes? Now, a little bit about my story and sharing, where I got a lot of what I'm doing now with my wealth building. Okay, I was a financial advisor for a number of years. In that, I was endorsed by Dave Ramsey. I worked with Pamela Yellen. I worked with, Grant Cardone. I worked with so many different people in the financial world. And what I noticed was that as I was doing this, I was learning a lot, right? I have my investment licenses. I remember, when I got my life insurance license, and there was a lot of studying involved in that. That was when I was 18 years old. And then I got they're called securities licenses, the licenses you get that allow you to deal in stocks and bonds and retirement accounts and mutual funds and this whole world of Wall Street. And so I started getting my securities licenses and I started learning about, Wall Street investing. I'll never forget, there was a time I sat down with a client and I helped them with their retirement plan, right? I showed them everything. I was like, hey, when you're 65 years old, you're gonna be financially independent. You'll have enough money for retirement if you live on 60 to 80% of what you make now, right? I'm excited. I'm like, I just delivered the plan and this is gonna help this person. But I remember looking across the table and seeing that they weren't that excited. Like they were still kind of like this somber, demeanor about their finances. And I couldn't understand in that moment, why wasn't this person excited like I was? They were probably in their 30s or 40s. They had kids, they're married, they've got the family, the house, everything going. And I'm showing them when you're 65, this is your financial independence number. Here's the amount of money you need to have in your retirement accounts to draw off of. And when you hit this number, you'll be able to retire. You'll be able to be financially independent. And it didn't hit them the way that it hit me. And I couldn't understand this for the longest time. And so as my career went on, I started actually having this kind of encounter more and more often. When you're a financial advisor, it's not like you're, selling a couch and it's like you're never gonna see that person again, or selling a vehicle where it's like, a one and done transaction. You're seeing people, 1 to 2 times a year minimum. So you're constantly checking in. You've got this relationship. You're their financial person. And I would see them and I would see that the disconnect was here. I was telling them, you're going to have the life you want 40 years from now, 30 years from now, 20 years from now. That didn't give them the life they want today. And imagine this, going to the gym, right? I used to be a personal trainer. You're doing all this exercise, you're working out, you're dieting, you're sacrificing, you're doing all the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And imagine me being your trainer and saying, you're doing such a good job. In 10 years, you'll lose weight. In 10 years, you'll build muscle. What would your reaction be? You would be a lot less excited about going to the gym, wouldn't you? You'd be like, wait, I'm doing all this work so that in 10 years, in a decade, and even worse, let's duplicate the retirement thing. 30 years, 40 years, I'll finally see the result that I want. You wouldn't go to the gym. You wouldn't. There would be no point. You'd be like, no thanks. I'm gonna live and do the things I wanna do and just forget that. Like I don't care about giving up the next 3 decades and sacrificing to finally have what I want. So I started researching and I wrote this book here, The Blueprint to Financial Freedom. If you don't have a copy, you can grab a free copy here in the video. But I wrote this book here because I started studying something that I was not taught to study as a financial advisor. And it's this really simple theory that I have. If you understand what the wealthy have actually done throughout history, the top 1%ers, the wealthy families, the individuals, the dynasties that we read about, people like the Rockefellers, how is it that they've been wealthy since the 1800s, everyone in their family? And the rest of us, we're over here like restarting every time. It's like, I'm broke and I struggle and I get to the middle class and I die. And when I die, my kids are also starting broke and they get to the middle class and they struggle and then they die. And then they have their grandkids and their grandkids also start broke and they struggle and get to the middle class and finally die. And it's like every single generation, we're starting from zero. And you study the wealthy, like the truly wealthy, not the guy who owns a couple of rental properties that you work with, like the actual wealthy. They're not restarting every single generation. And I started to see they're doing something different. When I started as a financial advisor, I learned about mutual funds. I learned about retirement accounts. I learned about, the IRA and the Roth and all these different things we're taught about. When you study the historical top 1% of wealth, one of the first things you will realize, and I'm going to put these up because these are my 3 things I want you to understand today. The first thing you're going to understand is that they play by a different set of rules. And we can all agree with that. We can all understand the wealthy do something different. They get different results than the rest of us. They don't go through the economic struggles we go through. They don't go through the problems that we experience. And one of the first reasons why is they use financial products that predate retail financial products. What is a retail financial product? A retail financial product is something like a mutual fund where it's created in a boardroom. Right? Like a bunch of old guys sat around in Wall Street and thought, how do we get more money from consumers without them feeling like they're buying a product? And the way that they did that is they created things like mutual funds. They created things like exchange traded funds where they're not investments per se. Like real estate, that's an investment. Like that's a thing. It's an asset that exists. It produces housing, it solves someone's problem. That's not a financial product. A business, if I buy into a business as a partner, that business is not a financial product. A mutual fund is. They're taking something and they're packaging it and then selling it to you and I. So when I studied the top 1% of wealth, one of the first things I realized the 401ks, the IRAs, all the stuff that we're being taught to do. The 1% didn't use them because those things weren't around back then. Mutual funds became popular in the 1980s. So if I'm trying to study how did John Rockefeller and his family build wealth, how did Andrew Carnegie build wealth, what did the Rothschilds do, how did Henry Ford build wealth, all of these different people, Walt Disney, etc., those products weren't around back then. Therefore, the wealthy didn't use them. So everything that's modern is pretty much something that I'm like, okay, the wealthy didn't actually use these things. Okay, and you might look at this and think, well, Jerry, you can't just write off everything that's modern. Like if we did that, we wouldn't have cars anymore. We would still be in horses. We would still, be using kerosene lanterns for our houses. Modern things are important. Yes, when the modern invention solves a problem for the user, right? So we upgrade from kerosene to lights. Why? Because it solves a problem for me and you. We can light our houses more efficiently. However, I want you to think of this. Let's pretend that the lights came into existence, they were invented, and it was worse than kerosene. Statistically speaking, like you could measure and you're like, it doesn't light the house as well, it doesn't light it as long, it costs more, all of these different things. You would statistically see that and you'd be like, okay, I'm gonna stick with kerosene. It doesn't make any sense for me to be using this new invention, electricity, if it doesn't work better. Same thing with the car. The only reason the car is popular is not because it's modern, it's because it's an improvement. It actually solves a problem. So I'm gonna give you a bold statement. The retail strategies not only predated by what the 1% actually used, the new age modern retail financial strategies statistically are less effective. If you go look at statistics, you can Google this, statistics on savings rates, retirement, how much do people have in their balances, how long is it lasting for? You can see it's not working. This is a first one generation social experiment. The 401k came out in 1979. The guy who invented it, Ted Benna, he says he created a monster and he wishes he never came up with the idea, right? If you study the average retiree, they're gonna run out of money within 10 years. The average retirement account balance is like 100 grand. So all this has done is it's gotten people to go to the gym with the promise that when they're 65, they'll finally see the scale move. Doesn't say how much, doesn't say you'll be healthy, doesn't say you'll live a long time. You'll just finally see the scale move. If you put enough money into this account, if you put enough money into these financial products, when you turn 65, you'll have something. We can't promise you how long it's gonna last, how much it's gonna be, that you'll be able to use it, all of those aspects. That's totally unpredictable. Like we can't guarantee the future. That's all of them are gonna say that, right? But that's the strategy. So when you study the top 1%, you'll see that they don't use those. They don't use mutual funds. They don't use financial advisors even. What are they investing in? So that's where I started to get into with this blueprint, right? Is, okay, what are the top 1% of wealth actually doing? And so I started to figure it out. They had a blueprint. Like if I'm seeing somebody, creating a certain outcome, when I drive through a neighborhood and I see like in a subdivision, like all the new houses that have built and every single one of them looks exactly the same. And they're all 20 feet apart with the same driveway, the same backyard. Some of them you might even be able to reach out and touch the neighbor's house, but every single one of them looks the same. I call that Whoville, right? That's just my own personal, what I like to call that is Whoville. The reason I call that Whoville is it's like it's the same house. My guess on why they can build the same house like that over and over and over and over and over is they have a blueprint, and they just follow that blueprint every single time. So the 1% have a blueprint in place, and that blueprint is different than what we're taught today. It's different than where we're being told to put our money. It's different than what our friends and family are doing. And when you go back and study like I did, you see that they start using different strategies. A lot of them use life insurance. A lot of them use real estate. A lot of them are into precious metals. Almost every single one of them in some way, shape, or form got into the banking business. That's what they've been doing. So that's what I started to do. My crazy theory, if they're successful and they've been around for a long time and their families keep getting to the same results over and over and over, what if I just copy what they did? What if I really started to understand what they did and I just copied that? And so I did that. I started copying it. I started, researching. Not only did they have a different blueprint, like what they did with their money, their strategic plan, but they had different materials. So not only was it, okay, their strategy is different. And let me tell you one of the ways their strategy is different. They're focused on building residual income. I'll give you one of the top 1% laws that I learned. Never trade new time for old money. So if I build a business, if I have a job and I'm trading my time for money, which is fine, that's how you start often unless you inherited a bunch of money from someone else. You've got to trade time for money. I didn't inherit money, you probably didn't either. So I've got to have a career or a business to get active income. But once I've traded that time for that money, I don't do it a second time for the same dollars. Why? Because then I'm trading money and time twice. I'm going to trade the same time. I'm going to work for the same dollar 2 times essentially. But I already worked for that dollar. I don't want to work for it again. So their blueprint is focused on how do I create active income and how do I convert that into income that's not something I'm trading more time for. It's residual. I get paid today and tomorrow for work I did yesterday. How do I do that? And when I do that, that starts to really develop and change things for me. So that's one of the strategy differences that you'll see. Now, the other part is the actual materials, right? So life insurance, real estate, precious metals, actual businesses, these are the materials that they used. So if I'm thinking of this house example, right, and I'm like, okay, all the houses look the same, they must have the same blueprint, but the other thing is that the materials, they've got to have the right materials. Otherwise, the houses can't be repeated the same way. It would be like we ran out of this kind of siding, we've got to move into using brick now. Okay, now you've got brick houses, they look different. Now, aesthetically, I like that. I like the differences. Financially, I don't. I want to replicate what the top 1% of wealth did. So what are the materials they're using? What are the tools? What are the resources that they're using? And I want to use those also. One of the things that I had to understand is I was a financial advisor, right? So I worked with Dave Ramsey for a long time. I was an endorsed local provider for investing, buy term, invest the difference. Whole life insurance, cash value life insurance is the actual devil. Never put money into it. It's the payday lender to the middle class. It's all of those things, right? That was my mindset for a long time, for many years. And so I remember studying and I'm understanding. I'm like, okay, the top 1%, I understand they're putting their money into real estate in order to get residual income. That's part of their blueprint. And I understand that they do, big things to earn active income. They're in sales or they're entrepreneurs or they're executives and they're really pushing their active income up. What I couldn't figure out is I was like, where do they save it in between? Because I was taught, and I was teaching people, you save your money in a bank account or you save your money in a retirement plan. I learned how banking worked. I learned they were borrowing against my deposits. I learned that the bank was risking my money and paying me little to nothing and doing this thing called fractional reserve banking, which means when I give them $1, they can loan out 10. And that, for me, I was like, I don't feel like wealthy people are doing that. I don't feel like they're just like, let the bank get rich and pay me nothing. Like they didn't get wealthy by doing that. Where were they storing their money in the middle? Because if I need $100,000 to do a real estate investment, for example, and I don't have $100,000 and I've got to build up in order to get there, where do I put the money while it's building up? That was my question. And I didn't want to put it in the market because I didn't trust the market and I could see the 1%ers weren't into the market either. I didn't want to put it in a bank account for the reasons I explained. I definitely didn't want to put it in a retirement account because then I couldn't use it. Like it would be locked up till I was 59 and a half. And I started searching and looking at, okay, what is it that they're saving their money into? Where did they put it? Time and time again, I started seeing life insurance from a guy who didn't like life insurance. So I would see it and then I would ignore it. and it would come up again, and then I would push it off and be like, nah, that can't be it, right? That's a scam, that's a bad idea, right? Over and over and over and over, I had this experience. And then finally, I saw the numbers. If you're like me, you know that things need to math. Like it needs to make mathematical sense, especially when it's money, it's all math. I was taught some specific things about life insurance that were true in a light. I was like, okay, these are bad things. These are things that I would avoid. And so what happened is there was an actual policy designed the way the top 1% of wealth designed them that was shown to me. And I studied the numbers, and the math was different from anything I'd ever seen before. That one specific tool designed that way is the right material for the job. And so then I used it for that. And this would apply to anything. Like when I was a kid, my dad, he did a lot of construction. We were painting houses and building houses in the summers growing up with them. Fiberglass insulation, one of the banes of my existence. I hate that stuff, right? If you've ever used it, if you get it on your skin, you itch like crazy because it's little tiny splinters of fiberglass. So if you touch it or if you breathe it in, it gets on you and it itches till no end. Like it's a terrible experience. So when I look at fiberglass insulation, I'm like, I don't like that stuff. I don't want anything to do with it. Why? Because I was using it wrong. I was touching it. I remember one time, literally guys, getting it in my eyes. I had it up over my head. I wasn't wearing goggles and it got in my eyes. I was using it wrong. Now, when you put it into the context of, okay, use it correctly, but just put it in the walls before you stick the drywall in there so you stay warm in the winter. And that's how it's correctly done. And you use gloves and you make sure you've got long sleeves on and you put goggles and a mask, you don't breathe it in, and you use it correctly, it actually serves a purpose. And I go from, I hate fiberglass insulation to, okay, if it's done correctly, I understand. And this is the life insurance for most people. You've been using fiberglass insulation without gloves on, without the proper materials in place, without your goggles, without your mask. You've been getting it all over yourself and you're like, I hate this stuff. You need to learn how to use it correctly because the 1% use it. If I tell you every single house in this neighborhood uses fiberglass insulation to stay warm in the winter with their house, and then you're like, yeah, but I don't like it, it's itchy, I'm gonna go without it, you're gonna be very cold in the winter, okay? Instead of going opposite to all of the successful people doing it, learn what they're doing and do it the same way. Final thing is this, the 1% had a different team. They had something called a family office. Right, so back to my house building example, like the team matters. Let's say you and I are building a house and we hire a team of contractors that never built houses before. They don't own a house themselves. They've told other people how to build it. They're a consultant, a little consultant of houses. They can tell you everything they've studied on the subject of houses, but you're like, have you built one? No. Have you owned one? No. You and I are probably not going to hire that person to build our house. Right, when I was a personal trainer, one of the things as a trainer that really frustrated me was overweight personal trainers. And I remember like me when I got into personal training, that was my dream in high school. I was a bodybuilder, right? So I was like, I'm gonna graduate, I'm gonna train people on bodybuilding just like I do, and it's gonna be awesome, and that's what I'm gonna do. So I got a job at the gym, a health club, right? Not a bodybuilding specific gym, just it was the only gym we had in Wasilla, Alaska that would hire me for something like this because it was the biggest one. Right, so there's a lot of opportunity there. If a young guy like me was like, hey, I wanna make my mark and do this, they're like, great, we've got a ton of clients you can work with. So I get in there and I'm doing my thing, right? Helping people build muscle, helping people lose fat. And I was kind of like, like if you're a trainer, I just assumed you're in good physical shape. And I remember seeing 2 or 3 other trainers that were in very bad physical condition. They were not in good shape. They were pudgy, they didn't really exercise that much, they were eating crap, and it was like, for me, completely unreal. I was, like brand new, I'm like 18 years old. I'm like, at this point, I don't know adults make mistakes still. Like I'm thinking like, I'm a kid, they're adults, they're professionals, I'm just starting. They should know everything and they should be doing everything perfect, and I can just, naively follow their example and get everything I need to get and become like them. And I started seeing overweight personal trainers, and they had overweight clients who weren't really getting results, and they were measuring things that really weren't that important. Not saying they weren't important at all, but they weren't like the senior thing, right? The senior thing is 2 things. Did you gain muscle? Did you lose fat? So those are the 2 things I should be measuring. They were measuring like, what do your feet look like when you stand this far away from your feet? How are they pointed? Are they in? Are they out? Right? Like little stuff where it's like, hey, I'm not going to say that that's irrelevant, but dude, this guy weighs 100 pounds more than he should. Let's worry about the angle of his feet after we help him get rid of the 100 pounds. And I relate this because my experience is what a lot of people have with financial advisors and financial professionals. We assume they're licensed, they've done this as a profession, they must be like the perfect example of financial health. Most of them are not practicing what they preach. They're in bad financial shape. It's like an overweight personal trainer with money. And as I studied the wealthy, I studied that the top 1%, they found this out early. They found this out very early. In fact, Warren Buffett says that Wall Street is the only place where a guy who drove in a Rolls Royce takes advice from a guy who took the subway. So the wealthy started this thing called a family office. And the family office means that they insourced their wealth. They found accountants, they found legal, they found asset protection, they found investments. They did all this and they ran it like their own business. Rather than seeing somebody and saying, here's how much money I have, go do the right thing with it. The wealthy were very interested in controlling their wealth and running it like an organization and doing things with their control and their knowledge and taking responsibility for how it was going to be done and learning about it and being very active in the building of their wealth. And that was a distinct difference, right? We've been taught by financial institutions that wealth is a passive endeavor and that all you've got to do is just live your life and just put it all in the retirement accounts and just trust us and let us deal with it. And when you're 65, come back around and we'll tell you what you can do. That's not how the 1% did it. Having the right team is important. And so you have to start viewing yourself the way that I had to start viewing myself. I am the CEO of my wealth. And when I started thinking about it that way, I was like, okay, if I'm the CEO of my wealth and this is like my own business and I'm running my wealth like a business, what do I like? What don't I like? What are the things I believe in? What are the things I'm comfortable with? What do I understand? What are the things I want to understand more? What are the things I don't want to understand because I don't care about them? And I began to build wealth my way on my own terms. And so these are some of the frameworks I put together. If you started understanding how the top 1% view their wealth and the strategy or the blueprint that they follow, I want you to think about like just that, like the gym example. You're not doing well physically, you're overweight, you have not enough muscle, and you're like, okay, I want to take someone that's really fit and I want to understand their workout plan. And I'm going to show up to the gym every day and I'm going to just try and do what they're doing. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to do the same weight they're doing or do it as long or as hard. But if you just started from where you're at now, your best effort to mimic what they're doing, would you or would you not see better results? You would see better results. Even if you don't do it fully correctly, you would see better results. The same goes for a wealth building blueprint. Wouldn't you see better results if you just took the knowledge of what the top 1% actually did during their wealth building and you started to try and mimic it? They do this, I'm going to try and do that too. Just like in the gym. They do this, I'm going to also try that. Oh, they do this, I'm going to try that too. Wouldn't you see better results? Now, the other thing is then the materials. You started looking at, okay, where am I putting my money? What financial tools am I using? Are those the things the wealthy use? Okay, with the gym, this would be like supplements. You're following their workout plan. That's going well. You're copying and mimicking as much as you can. What do they do for supplements? What kind of vitamins are they taking? What kind of protein powder do they use? And you started to understand this stuff, and similarly, you mimicked it. And you found out that they didn't use all the stuff most people use. They use very different things, very specific things, and for very specific reasons. Would you or would you not see improvements there? Financially speaking, the tools they're using, the materials, those are like the supplements. You would see better results, wouldn't you? Finally, the team. They didn't have the overweight personal trainer telling them to bounce on the ball for an hour. You barely sweat by the time you're done. They're like, I want to build muscle and I want to lose all this body fat. And they're like, okay, but first we're going to make sure when you stand, your feet point in the right direction. They don't work with that. They work with someone that's like, hey, you want to lose 100 pounds? I've done that. I've helped people do that. You want to gain muscle? You want the six pack? I've got one and I've helped other people get it too. That's the team. What if you started surrounding yourself with proven people on your financial team who have done the things you wanted to do and helped others do them also, that are true experts in their field? What if you just changed those three things, those three key frameworks to your financial picture? What would that do for you? How would that change things, do you think? It would definitely improve them, wouldn't it? So what I want to do, guys, I'm going to wrap up here. I wanted to share that because I felt like those three keys are like the basics. Anyone can start with these. If you want to learn more about them, again, grab my book, Blueprint to Financial Freedom. This is going to give you more, right? The three frameworks at the starting point. If you're like, good, this makes sense, I want to start learning more about this, grab the book, reach out. You can get that. The link will be included in the video here. And then from there, my team is happy to jump on a call with you and just see, where are you at? What can we help with? Are there things in here that we can help you get more clarity on and help with as far as strategies, the blueprint itself, the materials and tools you're using, or just connecting you with the right people for your team? Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. This has been my Wealth Walk. I'll see you next time.